Coming up on Now See This. A rescuer drops in on a storm-stricken sailboat.
G'day.
And gives the crew a lift. A stunt show is a smash hit. Until the big finale flops. And at the top of Niagara Falls, the Coast Guard keeps a man from taking the plunge. With felines falling, heifers hauling, and does dancing, it's enough to make your head spin. Think you've seen it all? Now see this. Towering over the Portland, Oregon skyline is the 11,000-foot-high dormant volcano, Mount Hood. Thousands flock to this peak each year, making it one of the most heavily climbed mountains in the world. Today, local firefighter Dennis Butler is among the climbers enjoying the challenge. But Mount Hood has a dark side, and right now, it's showing.
My first indication that something was wrong was just the sound of the ice falling down from above us. I had joined a group of climbers that were attempting to summit the mountain that day, and we were making our way up the mountain when two other groups of climbers actually struck one of our roped climbing teams, and the three teams went into the large crevasse towards the top of the mountain.
Over 20 feet deep and 50 feet from end to end, the crevasse known as the Bergschrund has just swallowed up 9 of the climbers. 6 of the mountaineers are still alive, desperately waiting for rescue. Among the fallen is 15-year-old novice climber Cole Joyner. And his father, Cleve, has no idea if he's okay.
There was this big wall of like snow and ice just coming down, and that kind of hit everybody, and put my head down, waited for that to clear, and then I looked up. And then Dennis sat down in the crevasse, and of course my first response was, "How's Cole?" He said, "Well, I can't see him."
A firefighter as well, Cleve instinctively dials 911 on his cell phone while his son's condition remains unknown. The dispatcher quickly contacts Steve Rollins of Portland Mountain Rescue, a volunteer rescue organization.
Well, I was at work when I got the page, and the initial call was that 7 people had fallen in a crevasse on Mount Hood, and I knew it was a very urgent rescue.
Rollins and his crewmates waste no time getting to the injured. They arrive to a chaotic scene. The climbers have already pulled most of their teammates out of the gorge, including an extremely fortunate Cole Joyner.
I feel very lucky to be alive. I was able to come out of the crevasse without a scratch, and 3 other people died within like 5 feet of me.
Helicopters begin airlifting out the more critically wounded, while Steve Rollins prioritizes who will go next.
We still had 2 additional patients that needed to be evacuated. We had a helicopter inbound moments away, so we really had to get organized quickly.
Local, state, and even military resources are utilized to continue the evacuation. But when the 939th Rescue Wing of the Air Force Reserve swoops in to pick up the last of the patients, there are problems almost immediately.
The PAVOC helicopters, which we use for high-altitude rescues up there, they're very heavy aircraft. Operating at 10,000 feet, they're somewhat near the limits of their abilities.
Suddenly, the PAVOC's massive engines start to whine. The 10-ton chopper veers left. Rescuer Tracy Rosenberry recalls what happens next.
It was deafeningly loud, ice was blowing everywhere, and I had my head down, and then all of a sudden it went totally silent.
The helicopter's rotor blades bite into the ice and explode. As the aircraft tumbles, one of the crewmates is thrown from the cabin and the chopper rolls over his body. The PAVOC finally comes to rest, and everything is still.
Couldn't really believe what I was seeing. You know, even though it's in the forefront of my mind, I had friends on that aircraft. To see good friends thrown out on the snow and know that you may be watching them die, you know, I don't know any way to put that. But as a rescuer, you know, you really have to keep your head together and focus on the task at hand.
Rescuers surround the downed PAVOC. The mood is grim. It seems unlikely anyone could have survived. But not only is everyone alive, most of the crew escaped with only minor injuries. Even the man who was thrown clear is still breathing, though he's in critical condition. Still, if it wasn't for the pilot's quick thinking, things could have been much worse.
The way that he crashed the helicopter saved probably everybody's life up there.
A second rescue effort begins. This time, to help the men who nearly died doing their duty.
To see people like that you respect so highly, and now suddenly they're helpless and they need you to rescue them, it really turns your world upside down.
Soon, all of the injured are off the mountain and rescue crews are on their way home. But on a day when some lives were tragically lost, everyone involved knows it was only a combination of skill and good fortune that allowed even more lives to be saved. On the border of the United States and Canada, Niagara Falls is an international attraction. This oft-visited landmark has also long beckoned daredevils attempting to ride the 167-foot drop down and live to tell about it. Most of them don't. But this is no thrill seeker at the top of the Cascade. He's a distraught man who came to the falls to take his own life. But the frigid rushing water snaps him back to reality only 100 yards from certain death. Now he clings to a submerged rock, the torrent relentlessly trying to pry him loose. Park rangers and swift water rescue personnel lower an empty raft to the raging water. They hope to pull it back to shore once the victim climbs in. But the lines are too short, and the raft is ripped from the rope. As the inflatable boat tumbles over the falls, it's a telling sign of what's to come if the man loses his grip.
Anybody in there?
With no way to save him from ground level, the rescuers put out a call to the Coast Guard. In 5 minutes, the helicopter is hovering over the falls.
So when we got on scene, we were kind of surprised to see this guy basically just submerged in the water that close to the falls. His hands and legs and everything were under the water holding onto this rock in 22 knot current, and I think the water was about 50 degrees.
It's been over 40 minutes since the victim hit the water. Battling the current and cold is trying enough. And his rescuers are concerned they might be adding to the difficulty.
The rotor wash from the helicopter is around 80 miles an hour. My main worry was that we might come in too close and blow him off the rock.
Eric Mueller descends into the churning Niagara, cautious of the entrance point. Where he goes in can be the difference between capture and catastrophe.
And I had no control as far as where I was going. So that was my main concern, that he was going to get knocked off the rock, and that would have been awful.
Eric manages to maneuver himself in front of the victim using his body to block the onslaught of water. But the danger is actually at its peak. If Eric slips before he can secure the victim, he'll jar the man loose, and there will be no saving him. Finally, the sling is safely around the man, and the two are winched carefully up to the helicopter.
But when I got him into the helicopter, he was, of course, cold. He was coherent. He was mildly hypothermic. He was actually a pretty tough individual to hold on that long. I don't know if I could have done it.
Only later does Eric learn that the source of this man's strength and his depression were one and the same.
I found out he was a Vietnam veteran. As he got into the ambulance, he saluted me, so I returned the salute. Even though he ended up in that situation, he was very thankful that we got him.
On the country roads of northwest Ohio, a highway patrolman spots a possible drunk driver. But when the car doesn't stop, it would appear alcohol has impaired the driver's judgment as much as their driving. The suspect drifts dangerously toward the oncoming lights. But today is not the other driver's day to die. Only a few feet separate the hurtling vehicles from head-on disaster. But this driver can find trouble even on open road. After quickly making a right, the suspect goes from DUI to trying to fly. launching the vehicle over the railroad tracks. The pursuing trooper keeps a safe distance as the suspect drives on the wrong side of the road. But ironically, the driver sobers up enough to brake at this stop sign. And that's when the trooper gets close enough to be shocked. It's a middle-aged, middle-class woman behind the wheel, and her moment of sobriety is over. She doesn't even realize this road has come to an end and steers right into the snow-covered field, plowing to a complete stop. When the trooper arrives at the car,
Hello. How are you?
he discovers this woman is a few days away from turning 40. And apparently, she went on a depressed birthday bender.
I can't believe you didn't wreck when you ramped over those railroad tracks.
You know what, Scott? I got 2 girls in OSU, and 40 really sucks.
How much you had to drink tonight?
I had 2 beers.
2?
The trooper can tell her math is off. But by any calculation, adding alcohol, midlife crisis, and motoring mayhem almost brought this woman and innocent motorists to the morgue. Cars are rolling on a Canadian afternoon, and thousands have gathered for a professional stunt car show. The show is an entertaining blend of comedy and thrills, but with each stunt, every performer puts their life at risk for the amusement of the audience. Revving up for the big finale, Harry Fry, father of 2, is behind the wheel. But it may be his final performance. This is not the right ending for his stunt. Show personnel and paramedics rush to the demolished car. Harry is not responding. With 2,000 pounds of steel crushing the roof and Harry's head, they call the forklift over to flip the car.
Son, I've been doing this 45 years. I know what I'm doing. As long as we go them easy. You get the weight off the roof, it'll come up a couple inches.
Tensions run high as Harry's friends coordinate how to get him out. But rushing in with heavy machinery could cause more injury. So the crew is careful as they position the forklift under the car. Stunt show workers put blocks under the upside-down chassis to keep it from coming back down on them or Harry.
We'll wait till he gets out of that car. Twist under there.
But only minutes after being compacted like a human can of tuna, Harry wiggles out of the vehicle. His instincts, training, and quick reflexes saving him from certain disaster.
I've stood cars on their noses so many times it seems like you're up there long enough to have lunch. I could feel the tap underneath me of the other car, and I knew something was going to go wrong. I have been taught from day one that best friend in the world is that empty seat right next to me, so grab onto it and hug.
But surviving the squashing was only his first problem. Harry had plenty of things to consider while he waited for rescuers.
When I landed, I was thinking survival. Am I okay? Did I break anything? Is everything still in place? I was worried about flames, spark, car upside down, gasoline leaks out the tank, leaks out the carburetor. Hopefully the engine's not too hot to start a fire.
Luckily, both Harry and his engine stayed cool, and the rescue personnel got him out of a tight spot. It's a moment his kids never expected to see.
My son was there, my daughter was there, and their first thought was, Daddy's dead.
Thankfully, they were wrong, and Harry will have the opportunity for many more curtain calls.
There's only 2 things that'll happen to you. You either get hurt or you die. And I was lucky enough just to get hurt.
Professional rescue worker Dave Greenberg may look like he's enjoying the ride, but he's actually scanning the water off Cape Turnagain, New Zealand for a catamaran in trouble. A storm so volatile it's nicknamed a weather bomb hit his boat at 4:30 a.m., And now, the catamaran is sinking into the sea. Thankfully, help has arrived. But today, there's an added danger. The storm is doubling back.
We had about an hour from the time we got there before the weather bomb hit.
Dave knows that if he doesn't get these men off that boat in the next hour, it'll be another day before he'll even be able to try again. And by then, it'll surely be too late. Of course, that means that Dave has to get from way up here to way down there. With a line attached from the chopper to the boat, he's lowered over the open sea.
As I'm being winched down, Dean up top has to worry about timing it so I'm getting down there at the right time. You don't want the two to meet. You don't want me coming down onto the boat as the boat's coming up on a wave, because you could start breaking legs and stuff.
The chopper has to keep its distance from the boat. If a rotor hits the mast, no one will make it home alive. It's difficult to see from this angle, but the waves are now cresting at around 30 feet. That's as high as the boat is long.
When you're on the winch wire, you're just the guy hanging on the hook, trusting everyone above.
But Dave stays focused on a safe landing as the swells rise and fall below him. Finally, he touches down. Once on board, Dave gets each of the three men ready for the ride of a lifetime. But there's no way anything could prepare them for this.
G'day. Okay, one of you stay in control of that. Who's going first? Step through. One there, one there. When you go, that's your bag? Yeah. Just hold on to it.
This contraption looks a little precarious, but it should work. The winch cable will pull him up to the chopper as the high line stays on the boat to stabilize his ascent.
You're gonna be pulled straight up. Hold on. Hold on.
In a heartbeat, he's plucked from the sinking ship.
Who's next?
One by one, the men are whisked nearly 100 feet to safety.
Okay.
Each man is only allowed to bring one bag of his belongings off the ship. The storm and the sea will keep the rest. But if Dave and his team hadn't been there with the equipment and skill to give them a life-saving thrill ride, they would have gone down with the ship. When the first snowflakes hit Spokane, Washington, Esther Stevenson tried to call her kitten back into the house, but she was too late. Her 4-month-old cat named Frog had somehow climbed all the way up to the top of this electrical post. But Frog couldn't manage to get himself back down. And now he's been stuck up there, dozens of feet in the air for 3 days, and those flakes turned into a blizzard. Esther called the police and fire department, but with all the snow, Spokane has been in a state of emergency. With larger problems on their hands, no one's had time to come out and rescue a cat. Esther's neighbors offered to help.
I told the fire department I'd climb up there and then they could come back down and just rescue me.
The kid's offer is sweet, but not very practical. With no solution in sight, things aren't looking very good for Frog.
Because no person can get up there to get that kitty.
The only one who doesn't seem too panicked is Frog himself. But that's because after surviving 3 long days and nights in a blizzard, he has to conserve his energy to avoid becoming one frozen feline. 72 hours after the initial call, this city worker comes to the rescue. But as Frog begins to turn blue, the question is whether help is here in time. Esther watches as the worker goes up in his crane, hoping that he'll bring her kitty down back safe and sound. But when Frog begins to slip, the rescuer's method seems far more drastic than Esther had ever expected. Don't worry, the cat's okay. He's just a little upset. The city worker isn't being cruel here. Once Frog lost his balance, he was in danger of falling directly on the power lines. By pushing him off, the rescuer was able to keep Frog away from the high voltage and electrocution.
Good. You did good. Thank you.
E25.
Frog may have used 3 of his 9 lives today, surviving the blizzard, the voltage, and the fall. Now, he'll gratefully spend the rest of his winter indoors. Los Angeles, California. Police are in pursuit of an armed and dangerous escaped convict. The FBI has been after the man for some time, and according to his profile, he won't stop, and he won't give up. Officers know there's only one way to end this rampage: knocking his car out of commission.
Oh, they're going to try and pit it. They're going to try and pit it. The suspect is now on Rosecrans Boulevard. He continues, Hawthorne PD in pursuit, and they will try and use the pit maneuver.
But the suspect counters the police maneuver with sheer speed, making himself a hard target to hit.
Okay, now this is a very small residential neighborhood here.
The driver blows through stop signs like they don't exist, while the officers fear for anyone who gets in his way.
And he runs right through the red light. Now we're going to come southbound here, southbound. And Hawthorne, look, they're right behind him, and he's going to try the pit maneuver here. Let's see what happens. They almost hit each other.
One of the units rams the suspect's rear bumper. But again, it's not enough to spin him out.
Extremely dangerous maneuvers right here.
Fearing the worst is yet to come, officers take their pursuit to the brink.
And here we come. Another car comes up fast.
But the suspect shows he's willing to go over the brink.
Oh, look how close to the oncoming traffic. That's just too dangerous. They're not going to do it. He's on the wrong side of the road. Comes into that intersection. 2 motorcycles and 2 cars in that intersection. Here we go. We're going to continue now. Oh, they're going to try it again. No, on the freeway. On the freeway.
The closest officer frantically tries to ram the car just one more time, but he can't connect. And the pursuit barrels onto the freeway, where the high speeds make ramming the suspect's vehicle far too dangerous. For now, all the law can do is try to control the chaos.
Westbound 105, westbound 105.
Meanwhile, the suspect is getting cocky. Believing he can't be touched, he cavalierly waves off his pursuers. But there's a surprise just ahead. The freeway is about to come to an end.
Okay, he's on the brakes heavy. He's on the brakes. He may try and reverse. He does. He tries to get back off the freeway, and they're pitting him. They're pitting him. He's turning around. Now they've got him boxed in. Okay, they turned him around. He's getting out. He's got his hands in the air, guns drawn. They did it.
As the driver pulls a high-speed U-turn, his car fishtails, giving officers a perfect shot at knocking the vehicle out of commission. The rattled suspect's brazen attitude evaporates, and he gives up without a fight. After all, even a criminal with delusions of grandeur must realize when he's outnumbered. The suspect almost lived up to his nasty reputation. But once he ran out of highway, his bad boy image got knocked for a loop. Whether it's on the road or in a building, when animals and city life mix, the results can be wild. Everyone loves the feeling of cruising down the freeway with the wind in your hair, even if you're a cow in Toronto. But this cow is on the lam. She managed to escape when a transport truck tipped over en route to the slaughterhouse. Now the open road is this fugitive's only chance. Panic starts to set in as she realizes that one false move and she's in the express lane to becoming a hamburger. It looks as though this heifer's hung out to dry until she manages to duck around her would-be captors. But she isn't ready for life in the fast lane as she cuts off a motorist. If she's not careful, she may not need to be caught. Now she's acting like a mad cow reversing direction. But it's pretty hard to make a getaway when you're running towards your pursuers. Realizing her error, she turns around and picks up speed. If she were in a car, the careening cow would be pulled over for drunk driving. But since she's hoofing it, police let her keep weaving. Eventually, a truck cuts her off, and unfortunately for the cow, the game of cat and mouse comes to an end. In Chester, Massachusetts, a kitten has been having some car trouble of his own.
We have a mother cat and 5 kittens that we brought down to hopefully find a home for them. We took them out of the car to cool them down, and one of the kittens went under the car and just crawled up by the engine, and now we can't get him out.
Maybe he likes to tinker with cars, but with no opposable thumbs to speak of, it's unlikely. Regardless, Animal Control Officer Joe Shaggy tries to help get him out. Unfortunately, the car is too low for Officer Shaggy to crawl underneath. So a tow truck comes in to help the rescue effort. With his improved view, Joe sees the kitty clutching the transmission.
Hi, kitty. I see ya.
Moments later, the little greasy monkey slides right out, and now this engine really purrs.
Careful, he is one wild cat. Got him?
Whoever adopts this kitten will be getting more than a cuddly companion. They'll have a pet who's happy to change their oil for them. And in nearby Somerset, Massachusetts, a deer has shuffled off into a local dance studio. She suffered a few minor injuries when she makes her grand entrance, but she's willing to sacrifice for her art.
I got a little bit stirred up because of all the construction and was running around, and apparently it had just run through the front window of the dance studio over here.
Her hoofs are a little shaky, but she still manages to strut her stuff. Eventually, though, she tires of the spotlight and decides to exit stage left and heads for the hills, much to everyone's relief. After all, when animals get confused and start behaving like people, it can be beastly.